but laughter from a lovely young brunette.
It's all right, Mom.
You don't need to say no if you want to see each other. Your grandma always said, everything should be done as your heart tells you. I want to do just that. To do, particularly because Anton frequently writes and tells me how much he misses you and longs to see you again. I don't see what's offensive about it, and I truly want to surprise him. I believe he will be content. In addition, we ought to meet his parents already. Not all surprises are happy, my love. Besides, it's a bit risky to go to Russia alone, particularly to someone you hardly know. Right now, you're too enamored to think about Anton's actual mindset. Bring him over here, my dad, and I will soon determine whether you and the difficulties of traveling to a faraway nation with little money and effort have truly taken this man by storm. Flying to Russia is not necessary. Another reason why I know Russian perfectly well, but Anton doesn't even have a basic knowledge of French, and it's not his fault. I was just lucky, and unfortunately not him. It's good that my beloved llama taught me Russian perfectly. You and I are now talking mommy in this wonderful and rich language, if you haven't noticed, and I don't feel any inconvenience. Yes, your grandmother is great. I don't understand at all how she decided to go with me as a baby after her loved one, but in addition to speech, there are some behavioral peculiarities in your place. I would certainly warn my Antoine that you are arriving. Let him meet you at the airport, and from there you can calmly get to his parents' village. Oh, Mom, am I little? I can handle it myself. You know perfectly well that in Russia bears and ear flaps with balalaikas don't walk the streets, and that such a thing has never happened there. And in general, did you forget that I am there, lived there for a whole month when I had to for work? So what and where to stay and how to call a taxi? I already know Sandra, and let me remind you, you were on a working delegation and there was always someone nearby who could give you some advice and help you. But now you are about to embark on a real adventure alone. The girl shrugged her shoulders lightly. Don't worry, Mom. If necessary, I'll sort out the other issues too. I've already drawn up a detailed route and outlined a plan of where to buy a local SIM card, how to get to the hotel, and then to the village. Anton, he told me that he would live there until the end of his vacation to help his parents cope with their affairs in the summer. He couldn't do it because he was working, and there he had to lower the harvest into the cellar and dry the fish and have time to fix the roof and all that other stuff. Besides, I want to meet Anton's whole family. Besides, I want to see how everything is arranged in reality, and maybe I can be useful to the woman shining with mature beauty and self-confidence. Shook her head and from excitement began to speak in Russian with a French pronunciation. It's just some kind of obsession, daughter. I understand you liked the man who talked so interestingly about things that you already knew from me and your grandmother without him, but it's just a romantic infatuation, and you can't build happiness on him. Anton may be a wonderful person, but how do you imagine family life with him? You won't leave me, Dad, friends, and your job. Sandra thought about her mother's question, and the woman, without waiting for an answer, continued to convince you that you have a decent education and knowledge of French height, but will it be possible to quickly turn it into a source of constant and decent income if you drop everything and move to Russia? Will your Anton be able to support you until you find a job? Of course, I myself was young, and I remember how falling in love makes my head spin, but maybe it would be better for you to consider another candidate for a suitor. Besides, judging by the photos you showed me, Anton did not make a good impression on me. You did not discuss that he would move here. We have decided for now that we will live in 2 countries. It is very romantic. Later, we will decide. Worried mother raised an eyebrow in surprise. Did not even suspect that you are so naive, Sandra. Long-distance relationships are good when they develop in someone else's life. It is certainly fascinating to watch sentimental films about them and read works like The Garnet Bracelet. In reality, the charm of such love will evaporate very quickly, Mom, but this does not mean that you should not even try. At least how much? But I will be happy, your beloved Vysotsky happy with Marina Vlada, which means long distance. Relationships can also be harmonious. Woman threw up her hands and continued stubbornly convincing you have found someone to compare with, and Vladimir Semyonovich and Marina Vladi are creative people free from the conventions and dictates of society, and your Anton, excuse me, has a look right through a pragmatic person. It does not look like he is a creative person, rather a businessman. No, Sandra, it is not the case you have conceived. Just believe. If you do not agree, Sandra, my dear, find yourself someone here in France. If it is so important to you, you can look for your happiness in the Russian diaspora. Not only Anton is so wonderful, I understand these relationships were for you. Not only distraction from work, but also exoticism. Again, such a turn of fate to return to the historical homeland of ancestors and meet love is very romantic. However, the business trip was left behind. You and Anton are separated by almost 4,000 kilometers, and also the difference in mentalities and a bunch of other big and small problems had raised your self-esteem, and now it's time to turn on your head. I think if you look at the situation calmly, you will find, and in it many shortcomings. Maybe you do not fly to Russia, but go to a psychotherapist to work out the problems. I have a good specialist in mind for working through the problems. He helped my colleague after her divorce from her husband. Think about it, Sandra. Quit, Mom. Don't even waste time on persuasion. I've already decided everything. Oh, Sandra. The woman sighed. You might regret this decision. However, you're already old enough. Even if you make a mistake, it's a shame, but you'll get experience. In any case, I'll support you. It's a pity Grandma is no longer with us. She would have given you a lot of good advice, but I'm just asking that you learn the phone numbers of Russian emergency service as well, just in case. Mom agreed. Sandra kissed the woman and almost in jump ran away to prepare for an important event. The girl decided to fly to the historical homeland of her mother and grandmother lightly, but very soon it turned out that you can't do without luggage at all. Firstly, you need to take with you both casual and dressy clothes and at least one pair of comfortable shoes in addition to the sneakers in which Sandra decided to travel. Secondly, it is necessary to make a pleasant impression on the groom's relatives and to please Anton himself. Grandmother taught that to come to visit empty-handed hands indecent and unthinkable, so it was worth taking care of souvenirs. Sandra, so as not to forget and not to offend anyone, made a list. Mother of Anton and his stepfather, two half-sisters, the elder Daria, and the younger Luba, the younger brother, 12-year-old Stanislav, whom Anton's mother gave birth to from her second husband. Also, according to the stories of the groom in the village, lived his aunt with her family, which means they also need to be respected. As grandmother said, choosing gifts was exciting. Wanted to please and not put in an awkward situation because of the excessively high cost of welcome gifts. Difficult task, and not to break your head for long. It was easiest to decide on a gift for stepfather Anton, since Sandra knew that Vladimir was an avid fisherman. So she looked into a specialty store and trusted the advice of the seller. Did not have to rack her brains for too long over a gift for Luba, with whom they somehow unexpectedly met on the embankment. Blue-eyed blonde with long hair. Despite the indignation of the elder brother, with partiality, asked Sandra about how life is in France. Especially, she was interested in how much things cost, cosmetics and perfumes. Anton attempted to pull his relative up, but she simply waved her hand at him, saying, "Listen, why are you interrupting a girl's conversation? We have something to talk about, so please be patient." Luba went on to ask, "Is it really possible to just go out in France and buy yourself a handbag that costs as much as a Boeing wing and walk around the streets with this insanely expensive bag?" Sandra smiled and replied, "Of course. Let's say my mother has a Chanel handbag that was a wedding present from her mother-in-law. For all the years Mom has had this." Luba said enviously, "All sorts of Louis Vuittons wear Chanel. Douse yourself. Don't be afraid. Men carry you French women in their arms and shower you with gifts, not like ours." She only went out with a handbag a few times a day, but these well-made accessories from a lesser-known company are no worse, and generally speaking, it is considered somewhat indecent to brag about brands here in Russia. Women wear much more elegant clothes than we do there. Promise, and so on ad infinitum in a circle. Listen, and how do frogs taste? Not disgusting. Clap. It seems to me that I would throw up if such a dish was served. Anton rudely interrupted his sister Luba. Listen, and you are in no hurry. In my opinion, it is time for you to run. Soon the last train will leave, and the landlady strictly forbade me to bring anyone. Besides, it seems you have already managed to find out everything that was especially interesting to you from Sandra, and you are asking about the taste of frogs out of curiosity. Go in the evening. I will call you. Sandra then suggested Luba take a walk together and then pay for her a hotel room, but Anton sharply objected. There is no need to spoil her, Lyubka. If you give her a finger, she will suck and bite off and run. The younger sister made an offended face and complained to Sandra. That's always how. Lyubka is not needed by anyone. It's offensive. However, Luba sulked for a short time. Smiling, she kissed Sandra 3 times first and then Anton. and quickly shushed. The impression from the meeting with Luba was ambiguous. Anton was gloomily silent for some time after that, and Sandra was a little confused. The looks the girl was throwing at her were very greedy and appraising. Of course, it could have been ordinary sisterly jealousy, and the topic of branded items and frog dishes was chosen simply for conversation. However, wanting to please a potential lover and turning a blind eye to large expenses, Sandra bought a small clutch for the groom's younger sister with a logo of two cross letters familiar to all fashionistas. Let Luba be happy. Choosing a gift for Anton's mother, the girl decided to stop at the classics and bought a beautiful silk stole of a well-known brand, and Daria purchased perfume for Stanislav, the younger brother of the groom, who chose to take a nice but inexpensive watch and a big box of a popular designer edition for her groom. Sandra purchased a t-shirt and a baseball cap featuring his favorite band. The girl also brought with her delectable treats that could withstand a long trip, including a bottle of fine cognac and exquisitely decorated perfume sachets that she could carry with her clothes, and an additional pair of shoes that Sandra could fit into a single suitcase on wheels. Sandra, are you sure you are not doing something stupid? At least warn Anton from the waiting room that you will arrive. Let him meet me, that way it will be calmer for me. The mother asked again as she dropped off her daughter in the taxi that was meant to take her to the airport. The girl reassured her mother that there was nothing to worry about, and that the groom himself said that surprises refresh relationships after the usual bustle of the airport. The silver plane took off from the ground, carrying Sandra and her involuntary fellow travelers to another country, and some of the passengers behaved differently. Sandra tried to watch a movie but soon realized that the plot did not interest her at all, so she took off her headphones and closed her eyes, but she did not want to sleep at all. Although she tried to convince her mother that there was nothing unusual or scary about visiting her fiancé's relatives, excitement filled the girl's heart, and she tried to switch to more pleasant activities. They were talking quietly, acting as though they were not at all worried about flying at an altitude of several thousand kilometers. On the first day of the business trip, Sandra started to recall how she had met Anton. After a meeting at the plant, the host Russian side invited the foreigners in full force to a restaurant on the embankment of the main Russian river. At first, informal communication did not work out, and Gerard, the head of the French delegation, was very unhappy with what he saw firsthand at the enterprise with which he intended to develop cooperation in a new direction. The man's disgusting mood even showed itself in little things, so he very expressively grimaced when he learned that the menu in this establishment was only in Russian and English, muttering an unpleasant opinion about the restaurant in particular and about Russia in general. The Frenchman began to point out photographs that aroused his interest. Sandra patiently translated the composition of the dishes for the picky boss and received a new stream of questions. The girl tried to smile when Gerard asked the waiter to clarify where the vegetables for the salad were grown, whether cow or bull meat was used for steaks, and in what region the cheese was made. Factory management, nervously thinking that due to a mistake with the choice of a restaurant the business cooperation could suffer, tension hung over the table like a heavy cloud, and the nice waiter, answering an endless stream of questions, at some point suddenly winked at Andre and suggested, "Please let your boss know that we have a dish of the day. It is a real hit, which the chef turns out simply divine. The only thing is that it contains nuts, so if you have an allergy, you will have to come up with something else." Gerard unexpectedly agreed. The pretentious Frenchman brightened his face and smiled after they tried the appetizers, and everyone sighed with relief to give the establishment credit. The dinner proceeded without any problems, unless you don't include the fact that, after the meal, the waiter took advantage of the situation and placed a piece of paper in Sandra's hand. The note had a phone number, the name Anton, and a heart drawn on it. The girl didn't give it much thought as to whether or not to call, and the very next evening, after completing her official duties, they decided on a date. Anton arrived with a beautiful bouquet of flowers and suggested that they go for a little walk before seeing a movie. Sandra enthusiastically agreed, because she wanted to see a new city and with a personal guide, so to speak, this would be more educational. Anton also explained that the girl was already safe during the conversation, saying, "Sorry if you are bothered by this question, but you introduced yourself as Sandra. This is an abbreviation for the name Alexandra." Sandra recalled with a smile how Anton's face lengthened when he learned that she was from France. He would never have thought the slightest accent was good, except for the fact that the clothes are obviously foreign-made. Now, it's not a problem at all. Oh, and you surprised me, Sandra. I've always been proud of my ability to understand people. That's my full name, and she opened up. My mother liked the singer like that. Then, laughing, he added, if only I knew that you were a foreigner and not a translator, as I thought, I would hardly have dared to hand you a note with my number. Sandra caught Anton's laughter and said, I am very flattered that you did not recognize the accent in my speech. So it is not for nothing that in our family they so zealously preserve the speech of our ancestors. That evening, the new acquaintances never made it to the movie theater. Instead, they spent the entire time sitting on a beach bench. Anton then went out for coffee and ice cream, which Sandra thought was the tastiest thing in the world. By the end of the walk, Anton proved to be a very pleasant conversationalist, and his unobtrusiveness and gallantry won the girl over. Even though the smell of the drink was combined with the smell of a cardboard cup, it didn't matter because the particular river air and space seemed to echo in her heart with the memory of her ancestors. The girl felt herself involved in this river all the time, carrying its waters somewhere, and to the lights with the onset of twilight invitingly flickering on the other bank, and even to the happy company of students who organized an impromptu game of beach soccer. That evening, Sandra felt as though everything was close and clear to her after a long period of wandering. She told her companion about her life overseas, and he revealed that, despite the village's official designation as an urban-type settlement, practically everyone has their own farm, and there are many more private homes than multi-story ones. My mother and my stepfather, as well as my sisters and brother, live on the street embankment at the very end of a house with a spotted roof, which my father bought at a discount. Discovered the remains of a corrugated sheet, and no one else has such beauty, so in general, it's not bad there, but there is no talk of any kind of career and all more or less respectable jobs are taken. That's why, after completing my mandatory military service, I hung around the house a little and set my sights on the city, thinking that I would become a photographer here and then become famous worldwide. However, it quickly became apparent that I was not expected here at all, and now I work as a waiter and make a little money in my spare time by driving an old car that my father gave me. Unfortunately, my iron horse is currently being repaired, or else I would have taken you on a tour of our area. Every moment of leisure is just breathtaking. Sandra attempted to spend time with the man she was interested in and reflected sorrowfully on the fact that she would soon have to return to France. Anton showed her his photos taken in his home country, and occasionally the girl's heart sank with joy, as if she recognized what she had learned from her mother's and grandmother's stories. The man, sensing the girl's feelings, ceased feeling ashamed about his pastime and how my father, Volodya, runs to fish every free minute of the summer and winter, saying that while he is fishing at the expense of his life and does not go, of course sometimes he comes home empty-handed, but usually he does not come without a catch. He then went on to talk for a long time about how interesting and beautiful his area is, with rivers, lakes, and even fish in them. I was not very interested in fishing, at least not that I remember him with a fishing rod. Because Charlotte could easily view photos or scan copies of documents via email and consult her boss remotely, Sandra, a slightly eccentric and plump woman who is well-versed in finance but frequently suffered from high blood pressure, decided to fly to Russia. Why torture herself when the problem could be resolved by simply using modern technology? Sandra was a little afraid of Charlotte, who dressed carelessly, so she kept her thoughts to herself. He dragged about 50 kilograms of bream from there because it was impossible to get through on his motorcycle with a sidecar. To do this, he had to make a sort of bag out of his raincoat and drag the catch. His mother then reprimanded him politely, but in addition to processing the fish, the raincoat also had to be cleaned with mushrooms. There are similar stories. I even went with my dad once when he was still alive to get honey mushrooms, but I didn't have a camera with me. You could only read about phones with cameras in science fiction. There is a path that extends out into a familiar ravine, where the milk mushrooms have raised the earth. My dad and I filled all the baskets that were there, sat down for a while and rested, but the mushrooms continued to grow. In general, Dad instructed me to run to his friend with one of the lightest baskets and tell him to start our ziguli and go for the harvest. Occasionally, a French woman with Russian ancestry asked again what slang terms meant, but overall, she understood nearly everything, and not just. Even though official duties took up a large portion of Sandra's time, she practically didn't notice fatigue and lived from one meeting to another. If Sandra was depressed on any given day of the week, Gerard and other members of the French delegation noticed that their young, charming translator had a romantic relationship. They attempted to persuade Sandra to do so, but Sandra ignored their attempts, even though they were done with the best of intentions. The girl only smiled softly at Monsieur Gerard, saying, "I have never been safer than in the company of my volunteer guide. Believe me, nothing bad will happen to me." The boss, who was old enough to be her father, began to sternly reprimand him, saying that he was responsible for the entire delegation as a whole and that walking around the city at night put the girl's safety in jeopardy. The girl's confidence did not convince the boss, and soon Charlotte approached her. Sandra, to be completely honest, did not fully understand what this woman, dressed in blouses, tunics with a neckline, short skirts, and tight pants, carried herself with such pride as though she were a fashion show model. At the same time, no one dared to make fun of Charlotte Sandra, who felt that she was not alone. The corpulent madam caused an explosive mixture of fear, surprise, and respect. The woman appeared to be kind, but as soon as she found something incorrect in the documentation, evil shot through her eyes, and she meticulously and methodically pointed out the errors and made sure that all the flaws were fixed. In the shortest amount of time, there were rumors in the company that Charlotte's ancestors were gypsies. However, these were discussed in a very quiet whisper, and Monsieur Gerard appreciated the extravagant employee for her business skills. Although the office dress coat was generally accepted, Charlotte was permitted to hide from her coworkers. Charlotte always maintained a distance, as though she was close by, but she also maintained her personal distance so easily that Sandra nearly shuddered when one evening when Anton was occupied, the woman addressed her in a deep velvety contralto. "Let me invite you too." Before she could comprehend the strangeness of such a proposal, the girl nodded in confusion and followed Charlotte like a boa constrictor into the room. The temporary hostess asked Sandra to sit down near a small table, and she herself sat down opposite in a deep armchair for a few seconds, staring at the guest. Then, as if enchanted, she abruptly gave the order, "Extend your palm." Sandra obeyed, and Charlotte ran a sharp bright pink nail along the lines. After a brief period of silence, Charlotte said, "Of course you won't." Although the air conditioner was operating in the room, Sandra suddenly felt hot. Of course, the company knew she was Russian by birth, but to do it so blatantly and pass it off as a sudden insight is already too much. Trust me, but I'm telling you very seriously that you're opening your heart to the wrong person, not for you. He's not too late yet, so stop. You can't take someone else's, but you're looking right, girl. It seems like your roots are here, and your destiny too. Hand away, got up to leave, and said, "Pardon me, but it's time for me to go." Charlotte didn't appear upset or disappointed, and she threw the words after the girl. "Everything must be done, as the heart tells, but your heart is now beating to someone else's rhythm." Naturally, Charlotte was aware that the translator's closest relatives were from Russia, but how she was able to replicate her grandmother's words so accurately was either mysticism or fate. Sandra didn't have time to reflect on it that night, though, because I understand everything, Anton, and sometimes I'm not free in the evenings either. In general, our business trip is coming to an end. Anton called him out of the blue and said that he had freed himself up specifically to take the girl for a ride in his finally repaired car. The man, carefully navigating the traffic, complained that he was busy almost all day and couldn't pay due attention to his companion. The girl shrugged her shoulders. "Moreover, my boss believes that informal business dinners help improve mutual understanding." After driving out of town, Anton parked the car on a low hill, and the girl felt that if she just stretched out her hand, she could reach the running clouds. Meanwhile, Sandra admired the sunset, and the man laid out food from a fast food restaurant on the hood. The pictures that the surprisingly warm August painted on the heavenly canvas were lovely and a little melancholy. The girl would have been happy to treat the affair on a business trip frivolously, but Anton did not respond to her questions and appeared to be paying even more attention to the road. Held a firm place in her heart. Of course, She was aware that their relationship could not last forever and that they were getting ready to part ways, but Anton managed to surprise her once more. After they had eaten a hamburger and had some tea that had cooled slightly, the man said, "Close your eyes for a minute. I need to prepare a surprise." Sandra complied, and when she opened her eyes, she noticed that Anton was holding her a velvet box with concern. "You and I are of course from different worlds, but I promise that I will definitely go out," the man said. "I am very glad that we met and will be happy to consider myself your bride." Sandra smiled gently at Anton and said, "A kiss," and then whispered, "I am very glad that we met and will be happy to consider myself your bride." The man hugged his beloved tightly, and they stood like this for a while before Anton started kissing, without hesitation. He wiped the tears from the girl's cheeks, and when the evening suddenly brought coolness to the lovers, he suggested, "Tomorrow is a difficult day." As they sat in the car in the parking lot for a while, Anton said, "Believe me, I will miss you terribly, and will try to get a visa as soon as possible to come to you. It will probably be easier to act through a travel agency. In general, I will solve this issue, and I think at the end of December under Catholic Christmas we will definitely see each other." Despite how sad it was, the lovers had to part ways at Sandra's request, and Anton chose not to accompany the girl to the airport so as not to start a fresh round of tears. Sandra almost didn't respond to what was going on around her. She acted automatically, translating everything that was expected of her. She even smiled, though she really wanted to stay and go to Anton. Of course, this was only a 7-minute impulse sigh, and she dutifully boarded the plane with the rest of the delegation. Deep down, the girl wished that, like in some TV shows, her beloved man would storm into the plane and ask her to stay, but of course, this didn't occur, and the plane took off the runway, carrying her farther and farther away from Anton. The girl was shocked when Charlotte, who had switched places with her neighbor, sat down next to her and, without saying a word, covered her palm with her own. This small act of support and sympathy suddenly became surprisingly calm. The warmth from the palm warmed the heart, the tears stopped dripping, and Sandra did not notice how she fell asleep. Sandra had almost completely detached herself from reality, remembering passionate declarations of love and promises of a happy future together. Slept through the entire flight. When she got home, the girl was so homesick for her fiancé that she literally buzzed her parents. Her husband told her what a great father he was, but he was upset about this and said right away that it was unlikely that a regular waiter who also lived abroad and worked as a taxi driver could make his daughter's life happy. Mom took Sandra's hobby almost calmly because she thought she was just playing at love, but she was mistaken. Every day spent apart only made Sandra fall in love. Even though Charlotte was not present, she was already flying back to Russia with a suitcase full of gifts and souvenirs to her beloved fiancé. Despite Charlotte's absence, the girl seemed to not feel the hardships of this journey, as Sandra fluttered her thoughts through her happy memories, automatically went through all the necessary procedures, and didn't even wait for Anton to fly to France because she was sorely lacking in remote communication. When she arrived at the urban-style settlement where the groom's relatives lived, an elderly taxi driver said, "Sorry, but after the recent rains the rut is so that my tummy is at risk of getting stuck for good." He took the passenger's suitcase out of the trunk, took the money, turned around and drove Sandra away, trying not to consider the fact that the sneakers and luggage would likely be extremely dirty and that the guest's perception of Anton's relatives could be distorted. In an attempt to find a cleaner route, the girl left what was now hardly functioning as a road and went onto the side of the road, where at least the grass provided a false sense of dependability. The French woman slipped multiple times, and the suitcase only made it harder for her to stay balanced. It may have been a miracle that she did not fall once, but love kept Sandra going, and after a challenging walk, she eventually came to the cherished gate. The girl looked around, but saw nothing. When Sandra entered Anton's family's plot, the lingering warm autumn took pity and had not yet had time to shake off all the leaves from the plants. Of course, it was unusual and exciting to enter private territory without the owner's permission, but she had an excuse. She couldn't wait to see Anton. The girl cautiously opened the door and was delighted to see that there was a neat concrete path on the plot, trying to wipe the dirt off her shoes and suitcase wheels, the grass growing in front of the fence. Sandra did not say anything to defend the bride. Instead, the man hugged Luba by the shoulders and kissed her on the top of the head. However, the tall, fair-haired stranger standing close to the bench spoke up, and if you judge by her appearance, there could be no doubt that it was Daria, Anton's older sister. She laughed, threw back her head, and then stopped laughing after the joke she told. She then bit off an apple with gusto, but the worst part was not her laughter, or even the meaning of the offensive tirade. Sandra moved smoothly toward the house along the grape hedge because she was afraid that a guard dog would suddenly charge at her from somewhere. That's when Anton's voice could be heard behind the translucent green canopy, and the girl instinctively stopped Luba. "Come on, moderate your greed because I plan to fly to Sandra in December for now, and I need to save money for the trip. I'm in a strict saving mode now, so roll up your lips, dear Sandra. And Toshka, come on. Hurry up and do the deal with your frog lady. I'm already tired of taking up a place on the bench, and in general Sandra has a bad influence on you. You're becoming a curmudgeon, and the likes of which the world has never seen. Soon you'll start catching frogs along the banks, eating them and squealing like a piglet." Sandra saw through the slits in the grape wall how Luba appeared to be speaking. "Oh, Dashka, stop nagging me. I'm telling you I need a little time," was Anton's response, echoing his sister's tone. "There's no point in you and Lyubka getting married to me now if you and I manage to save up for a trip to France, and they're to charm Sandra suddenly, she accidentally or otherwise. You can't take such a risk, especially since all that is needed is a little patience." Sandra listened, afraid to even sigh aloud to avoid giving away. Of course, curiosity can kill a cat, but in some cases, this fatal mistake can save very interesting details. Now that she knew that Luba was actually Anton's girlfriend and not his sister, the conversation only confirmed this suspicion. Dasha's reaction to her brother's words became even more outraged. "Lubasha is expecting a child from you, and you keep feeding her promises that it's not good." The man was sluggishly indignant, but he was still hugging Luba. "You would think that I asked her to get pregnant. So don't be afraid, did everything myself so that I need a little time to fly in and everything will be fine. However, later on you want me to run and register my marriage with Lyubka, but please just tell me what, please, our family will." Naturally, Lyubka will want to live in the city, and my intuition tells me that the landlady won't notice the stamp on the passport and will instead throw us out on the street. Where will we go? Or will you order me to move here and work for absurd wages, or better yet, I could commute to and from the city every day, but I doubt I'd have enough money to cover even gas? I need money to be happy, so if you are both so naive as to not see this basic reality, then what will be expected of me? Eat grey pasta and on holidays, whether it's from durum wheat and red fish, which you love just as much as my sister, you will only see in your dreams, and meat, aside from the one you manage to grow, can only be remembered on special occasions. Daria tried to defuse the situation and protect herself. "Well, don't make it too dark because you work in a restaurant, so you can always bring something." The man also kept bending his line. "Of course, if it suits you to eat scraps like piglets, which we will live almost like beggars but like a happy family," as Luba so eloquently illustrated. "In addition, I won't have to constantly run around with trays and appease various jerks. Yes, the staff doesn't think of us as human at all. Can you imagine what we have to go through? In addition, they are tightening the rules and won't let you take as much as you used to, so I'm going to quit there soon, and I ask you not to rely on restaurant food, even if it's just scraps." She begged. "Antosha, my dear, I also dream of living well in the city with you, and not having to live from hand to mouth, but you must understand me too. I am tired of waiting. How long can I be in such an uncertain status? I would like our child to be born in a legal marriage. Let's somehow organize a trip to this frog lady of yours faster." Anton's voice became irate. "Lyubka, why are you being so impudent? What are you suggesting, that I beg Sandra for money during our conversations to visit her?" "Oh, Anton, how independent you are. Well, you are a man and everyone has to prompt you." Luba scowled and proposed. "Imagine what she will think of me. She will just send me far away, and our dreams of well-being will collapse." They will likely grant you a loan even though you will have to pay interest since the profit will still exceed the expenses. Following the suggestion of a loan from her friend, Dasha said, "No, Luba, I don't like this concept at all. Not just with the loan, I don't like using a helpless frog for personal gain in general. Anton, perhaps you could tell Sandra that nothing will work out for you. At the very least, it would be honest. Of course, it's not necessary to tell her that you only got involved with her in order to take advantage of her. You could just say quietly that you don't want to burden her overseas and that you are unable to move there for a variety of reasons. It will be a pleasant farewell, and perhaps you will still be friends, and she will give you gifts. Send you gifts. I hope we can at least get back together someday." Anton's patience apparently ran out, and he nearly snarled at his sister Dasha. "You are a dumb woman. What good is your honesty to me? Did I waste my time trying to win this French woman over?" Sandra became so disgusted that she nearly sat down on the concrete path and started crying out of resentment, but a child's quiet voice behind her kept her from expressing her feelings. "Hey, why are you hiding here, and who are you anyway?" When the girl turned around, a slender boy was observing her and the suitcase with interest. "Wow," the child exclaimed, whistling. "Are your Converse real? Wow, and you stomped down our street in them? Wow, although no, for sure they are not real, and you bought them at the market. Real Converse. It would be a shame to need the mud, and you are silent." The boy's ringing voice caught the attention of the Trinity, who were conversing behind the grapevine, and Anton yelled, "Little one, what are you making noise about there? Who are you talking to there?" Who the hell knows who some woman is standing there with a suitcase but is silent? I mean, the woman is silent, not the suitcase, although it is also quiet. The child's sense of humor flared, and he was not at all alarmed by the stranger he saw on the sight. Sandra knew that she would now have to confront the liar and tried to disappear before Anton noticed her, but her legs deceitfully refused to cooperate, and in addition, the luggage would obstruct her escape, so she threw it as a prize to defeat him. You couldn't make ends meet with your mistress and family. When Anton found his French wife beside his brother, his expression widened in astonishment. After Dasha and Luba emerged behind the guy a few seconds later, Sandra turned to her adversary, whom she had not even aware existed until lately, without bothering to welcome him. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Luba silently chuckled at me when Anton presented you as his sister, believing that your sweetheart could easily trick such a gullible foreigner. It was well considered." Immediately. The biggest scam of the century. Anton's plan might have succeeded if I hadn't arrived. I didn't know what part of the conversation Sandra overheard, but Anton tried to correct the situation. "My love, it seems you got it all wrong. Don't be upset or make snap judgments. I'll explain everything to you now." Of course, the ex-fiancée. Sandra laughed nervously and started to express her fairly valid resentment. "What impudence, Anton. I don't even want to hear anything. I wanted to surprise you so much that I flew in without warning. I firmly believed that you made an effort to prepare gifts and make friends with everyone, including my mother, my stepfather, and my brother, who untimely found me cutting off the path to entanglement. I also wanted to meet and find a common language with your sisters, but here's a surprise. One of them turned out to be not a blood relative at all. Nevertheless, as far as I can tell, a very close person probably has to congratulate you and Luba."